The rain came down in sheets that blurred the razor wire fence into a silver haze. The mountains around Fort Wraith were lost behind the storm, their outlines swallowed by low clouds that pressed against the base like a hand over a secret. Floodlights cut through the rain in hard white cones, glinting off puddles and the wet barrels of rifles. Morning reveille hadn't sounded yet, but the checkpoint was already alive with quiet tension, the kind that lived in places where nothing was ever ordinary. The black SUV rolled up to the gate, slow, deliberate, wipers beating a steady rhythm. The engine idled low as two MPs approached from the guard post, their ponchos whipping in the wind. One motioned for the window to come down. It did, smooth and soundless. Inside sat a woman, straight-backed, gloved hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes that didn't flinch even under the harsh beam of the flashlight. "Morning, ma'am. Identification, please." Captain Lyra Hensley passed over a sealed envelope marked Times Restricted Access, Level 7, asterisk. The younger MP took it with a hesitation he couldn't hide. He glanced at her uniform. Standard Army issue, no rank, no unit patches, no nameplate. The only color on her person was the faint gray of rain soaking through fabric. He slid the envelope through the scanner slot in the guard booth. Seconds passed. Then the computer chirped, not the dull green of approval, but a flat red denial. Asterisk. No record found. Asterisk. The second MP leaned in, frowning. "Ma'am, this credential isn't showing in our system. You with a visiting delegation?" "No." Contractor?" "No." "Then I'm afraid." Before he could finish, she opened the door and stepped out. The move was smooth, quiet, like a decision made long before it needed to be. Rain darkened her hair against her collar as she adjusted her cap. The MPs shifted uneasily, their hands brushing near their sidearms out of habit, not threat. She raised her gaze to the gate steel, locked, unyielding, and then to the men. "Tell General Arden," she said, voice even, "the Raven has returned." It wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of tone that didn't need to be repeated to be remembered. The phrase hung in the wet air. One of the guards blinked, confused. The older one, a sergeant with 12 years behind that post, froze. He'd heard that call sign before, whispered in smoke-filled barracks, attached to stories that were never written down. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I don't know what you think." "Then call your superior," Lyra interrupted softly. "He'll know." The younger MP moved to the radio, voice tight. "Control, this is Gate 1. We've got an unidentified female requesting access under the codename Raven. Repeat, Raven." A burst of static, then silence. Even the rain seemed to pause. Inside the SUV, the engine still idled, exhaust curling like breath in the cold. Lyra stood unmoving, her expression unreadable, eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the gate, the mountain peaks that hid Fort Wraith's command center. The radio crackled again. "Gate 1, confirm name?" "Captain Lyra Hensley," the MP said. "No active file on record." A pause. Then another voice came through, lower, older, clipped. "Did she say Raven has returned?" "Yes, sir." "Hold position. Do not engage. I'm dispatching command liaison immediately." The MP looked up, startled. "Copy that." The sergeant stepped closer, curiosity cutting through caution. "Ma'am, you mind me asking, Raven's just a code, right? Some old call sign?" Lyra's eyes met his. They were cold, not from malice but memory. "It's not a code," she said quietly. "It's a promise." The sound of approaching engines rolled through the mist, more vehicles, heavy, official. The guards stiffened, realizing this was no ordinary situation. Lyra didn't move. She stood in the rain, hands behind her back, every inch of her bearing military. Not the polished stiffness of parade grounds, but the kind earned in shadows, the kind that made soldiers straighten without knowing why. Somewhere deep inside Fort Wraith, alarms that weren't supposed to exist flickered to life. Files long buried under clearance locks began to open. And by the time the convoy crested the hill toward the gate, every man on duty understood one thing. Whoever this woman was, she hadn't come back to ask permission. The storm pressed harder against the mountains as the message rippled through Fort Wraith like static in the wires. Inside the operations compound, the air carried that peculiar electricity of half-truths and rumors colliding with reality. Computer screens flickered, encrypted channels opened and closed in rapid sequence, and somewhere a printer spat out a clearance denial stamped in red. Colonel Darius Haldane stood at the center of the comms room, jaw tight, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He'd been on edge since before dawn, but this was different. This wasn't another security drill or paperwork glitch. The MPs at Gate 1 had reported something that didn't belong to any of his checklists, a name that shouldn't have existed anymore. She gave what code name? Haldane asked again. Raven, sir, said Sergeant McAllister, headset pressed to his ear. Full phrase, the Raven has returned. The MPs confirmed she's presenting Level 7 credentials, but there's no digital signature to match. She's not in any personnel archive, active, or retired. Haldane turned toward the bank of monitors, voice low. Run it again. Cross. Check all black site rosters, off-book divisions, any shadow programs authorized before 2020. The technician hesitated. Sir, those lists are above our clearance threshold. Then find someone whose clearance isn't. The room moved with nervous precision. Every officer there had seen strange things pass through Fort Wraith, unmarked convoys, sealed containers, men and women who appeared and vanished like ghosts, but this one was different. This one came with a name that carried weight. The colonel's aide leaned in. Sir, the veterans in the West Wing, those who served during Jarev, they're asking questions. They say Raven was a commander. One of times there's asterisk. Haldane frowned. Black Jarev? He hadn't heard that name spoken in years. The official record said it was a supply line sabotage gone wrong in the Caucasus foothills, a failure buried under layers of classification. But the way the old operators talked about it quietly, after too much whiskey there had been more to it. A team that never came home. A leader who'd vanished into the smoke and static. He rubbed a hand over his face. Christ. The comms screen blinked again, an incoming encrypted transmission demanding priority. The operator looked up. Sir, it's Command Oversight General Arden's direct channel. Haldane nodded sharply. Put him through. The line clicked, and the general's voice cut through the static, low and precise, like a blade against glass. Report. Sir, unidentified female at Gate 1. Claims identity as Captain Lyra Hensley. No active record found. She used the phrase, Raven has returned. Silence. Only the hum of the generators filled the gap. Then Arden spoke again, slower this time. Confirm the name. Yes, sir. Lyra Hensley. Another pause. The general's tone shifted, no longer surprised, but heavy, like a memory settling on his shoulders. That name is not to be repeated outside secured channels. Keep her there. Do not detain, do not search, and under no circumstances raise weapons. I'm en route. Sir, should I alert Security Command? No, Arden said flatly. You'll stand down. She outranks you, Colonel. You just don't know it yet. The line cut. The room was still. Every man and woman in the command center looked toward Haldane, their screens filled with redacted lines and clearance blocks that refused to open. The colonel swallowed hard, a slow realization creeping in. He didn't know who this woman was, but the general's voice had carried something rare respect, and something colder. Fear. In the west corridor, two older sergeants whispered near the armory door. You think it's really her? One asked. Could be, the other said, eyes distant. They said she held the line at Jarev when everything went to hell. 6 hours under fire. Got the rest of the unit out. Then nothing. Gone like smoke. What happened to her after? Nothing official. You don't retire from ghosts like that. They just fade. Outside, the rain kept falling, unbroken. The gate lights glowed through the mist, and beyond them, Lyra Hensley stood where she'd been left motionless, head slightly bowed, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Inside the base, lines of encrypted code scrolled across every screen, like the system itself recognized her before the humans did. An old file tried to open, denied, then forced access. The title blinked once before vanishing again. Asterisk asterisk Project Raven classified reactivation lock. Asterisk asterisk. Colonel Haldane stared at the empty monitor, a chill crawling down his spine. Somewhere between the hum of the servers and the hiss of rain on metal, it felt like the base itself was waking up. The sound of engines rose through the valley long before the convoy came into view. It started as a low vibration in the rain-soaked ground, then swelled into a synchronized growl that sent every guard at Fort Wraith's checkpoint standing rigid. Floodlights cut through the storm in white beams as 3 armored vehicles appeared around the curve, their headlights slicing through the fog like the eyes of something ancient. The MPs scrambled into formation. Radios snapped alive. Convoy approaching, repeat. Convoy approaching, government plates confirmed. The words came out clipped, mechanical, but every soldier could feel the undercurrent. This wasn't routine inspection protocol. No one rolled through Fort Wraith without notice. Not at this hour, not in that kind of convoy. Lyra Hensley hadn't moved. She still stood where she'd been left motionless in the rain, hands clasped behind her back, her gaze fixed on the road. When the first vehicle stopped, its tires hissed on the wet pavement, and the rear doors opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. General Arden stepped out. The storm seemed to bow around him. Even in the downpour, his uniform remained immaculate, the silver stars on his shoulders catching the dim light like small pieces of lightning. He didn't speak, didn't look at the guards who snapped to attention. His eyes found Lyra immediately, and for the first time since he'd taken command of Fort Wraith, something in his expression shifted, not fear, not anger, but a recognition that carried weight. He walked forward alone. Each step echoed against the pavement, swallowed by the rain but felt in every chest watching. When he stopped, it was 3 paces from her, the perfect distance between salute and respect. And then he raised his hand first. The salute was slow, deliberate, the kind of gesture reserved for those whose authority transcended rank. The guards froze. The sergeant nearest the gate actually forgot to breathe. The idea of a general saluting first was nearly unthinkable. "Permission to speak freely, Commander Hensley," Arden said. The title hit the air like thunder. Asterisk Commander. Asterisk. The word rippled down the line of soldiers like an electrical current. The younger MP, the one who'd first taken her ID, blinked in disbelief. "Commander?" he whispered under his breath. "But her file, she's listed as KIA." Lyra's eyes never left Arden's. Rain streaked down her face, caught in the faint curve of a smile that wasn't pride, wasn't triumph, just acknowledgement. "That's what they needed to believe," she said quietly. Arden's jaw tightened, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Project Eclipse has been reactivated. We need Raven Actual again." A pause, long enough for thunder to roll across the mountains. Lyra's breath came slow, steady. For a heartbeat, her eyes flicked toward the gate that had barred her not 20 minutes ago, the steel, the rifles, the hesitation. Then she looked back at him, unreadable. "Then I assume you already know what that means," she replied. "I do." "Good," she said softly. "Then I'm not here for a reunion." Behind them, the MPs and soldiers stood frozen, their weapons slowly lowering one by one, the realization spreading like a wave. Whatever authority this woman carried, it wasn't written in orders or badges. It was older, deeper, the kind of command that lived in the unspoken trust of those who'd seen war from too close. General Arden turned to the men at the checkpoint. "Lower the gate." His voice was calm, absolute. "Yes, sir." The heavy metal barrier began to rise with a slow mechanical groan. Rain dripped from its edges like blood from a blade. Lyra didn't wait for it to finish. She stepped forward, boots splashing through shallow puddles, moving past the guards who had tried to stop her. Each of them straightened instinctively as she passed, not out of fear, but out of something far rarer in the military world: reverence. The SUV door opened, and she climbed inside without a word. General Arden followed, settling across from her. The interior lights flickered for a moment, illuminating her face calm, composed, unreadable. Outside, the soldiers watched as the convoy turned back toward the base, engines roaring to life once more. The rain swallowed the sound, leaving only the echo of what had just unfolded. One of the MPs exhaled slowly. What the hell just happened? The older sergeant shook his head, his voice barely a whisper. You just saw a ghost, son. And the general saluted first. The words lingered long after the convoy disappeared into the storm, leaving behind the uneasy understanding that some legends never die, they simply wait for the right moment to come home. The hum of the generators filled the operations bunker with a steady mechanical heartbeat. Deep beneath Fort Wraith, the air was colder, denser, and carried the faint metallic tang of recycled oxygen and old secrets. The storm above was only a whisper here, distant thunder muted by layers of concrete and steel. The walls pulsed with light from monitors that were never supposed to be on again, long dark systems waking from classified hibernation. Lyra Hensley stood before the central console, the blue glow of the screens casting sharp lines across her face. Data streamed upward: coordinates, encrypted designations, operation codes so heavily redacted they were more black than text. At the top of the largest screen blinked the header, ***, Project Eclipse Classified, divided by active, ***. General Arden stood beside her, one hand resting on the console, the other gripping a folder thick with sealed reports. His posture was rigid, but not from protocol, from the weight of what had just been reawakened. They thought the threat was buried, he said, his voice low and even. But it wasn't, it never is. Lyra's gaze shifted to the wall of surveillance feeds, blurred satellite images, foreign coastlines, clusters of heat signatures. Her reflection swam faintly on the glass, the soft halo of light tracing the scar that cut diagonally from her jawline toward the base of her throat. She didn't touch it, but Arden's eyes flicked toward it, then away, the gesture wordless but heavy. Everyone in the old unit knew what that scar meant, how she'd earned it in the ruins of Jarev, the day the mission went to hell and the radio went dark. She didn't speak for a long moment. The rain streaked the reinforced window above the bunker's observation platform, each drop illuminated like falling silver under the floodlights. When did they start moving? She asked. 3 months ago, Arden said. At first, isolated communications intercepts. Ghost chatter remnants of the network we dismantled after Jarev. We thought it was mimicry, disinformation, but now, he gestured to one of the monitors. A live feed showed a convoy unmarked, heavily armed, somewhere across a frozen plain. They've regrouped. Someone's leading them. Someone who knows our protocols, our extraction grids, our infiltration patterns. Lyra's eyes narrowed. A traitor. Or a survivor, Arden said. You trained them after all. Some might see that as your legacy. She turned toward him, not angry, but unflinching. Legacy's just another word for unfinished work. He didn't argue. Instead, he set the folder on the table between them. Inside were 7 names, all from Project Eclipse, all crossed out. Every one except hers. I need you to rebuild it, he said. The same way you did before. Off book, no oversight, no paper trail. If this resurfaces and we're not ready. He trailed off, looking at the red warnings flashing on the data feed. You know what's at stake. Lyra looked at the names again. The memories came: unbidden faces caught in muzzle flashes, whispered orders over dying radios, the heat and dust and chaos that had swallowed her last mission. 4 of them gone, 2 missing, 1 presumed dead. The silence that followed had lasted 5 years. She reached into her jacket, pulling out the black tactical tag she'd kept hidden all this time. The emblem of a raven in flight, engraved metal worn smooth by touch. She placed it on the table beside the folder. Then we do what we always did, she murmured. Arden's eyes softened. And what's that? Lyra's gaze lifted to meet his. We go in silent, we come out ghosts. For a heartbeat, the room was utterly still. Then Arden straightened, nodding once not as a superior officer, but as a soldier who understood exactly what he was asking her to become again. Outside, alarms began to cycle through their reactivation sequences, one by one dormant sectors powering up, security systems locking into motion. Somewhere above them the storm broke, thunder rolling down the mountain like a war drum. The floodlights beyond the gates flickered, and the last of the night's rain began to clear. Lyra turned toward the elevator leading back to the surface, her boots striking the metal floor with the unhurried rhythm of certainty. The base gates would close behind her soon, sealing Fort Wraith from the rest of the world. And as the heavy doors slid shut, the wind howled through the mountain passes like the cry of something ancient and reborn. The storm outside was fading, but the one within had only just begun.